And we're on time and live.
And we're on time. Welcome to RAGIN with Russ Leach. It's double trouble today. That's right. We're talking to JD Calderon this morning. We are talking to Russ Leach this afternoon. Episode 58. What? Kind of crazy. We're going to be talking about death, pestilence, war, all kinds of mayhem, and his creative journey. It's been a hot while since we've been sitting with Russ, and we're glad to have him. But we have an intro, and while that's playing, you guys can hit the subscribe button and share this out with your friends. We're going to have a fun time. That's right. You want to share the love. Go ahead. Do it. Hit the button. All right. And here we go with our intro. We'll be right back after this.
RAGIN.
Grab a seat, everybody. We are going to be spending the next hour with our friend Russ Leach. We're going to drop the card here. Indeed, it is 2 live streams in a day. We might even vlog later because we're not. You had enough. Hi, Russ.
Hello. How are you?
How are you? I am looking forward. This is book 1.
It's book 1 with the nice satin cover.
Yes, I love it. I love it so much. I love the story. I love the art, and I'm looking forward to book 2. But we like to talk about the creative process, the creative journey that got you here. Tell us a little bit about your history, what you have been doing in comics and illustrations and things like that, so people can kind of get to know
okay. It goes back to 95. Where I did submit my work to Marvel and was accepted by the new talent manager. But unfortunately, that didn't go anywhere. So I kind of felt like I might have what it takes. At least that's what Louis Lewandowski told me. John Louis Lewandowski, I think that was his name. Previously at my art school, I'd been told not to bother. My illustration was rubbish. So I went off and became a designer and an art director. So in 95, I still had the bug because obviously I love comics, and tried it on again, and they got a positive response, but it didn't go anywhere. So I had to go away, have a mortgage and a wife and a family and all that kind of stuff. And I had my own business. I was in production, design, art direction, all that kind of stuff, publishing as well, until about 2008. And the business came to a good end. I'd had enough of what I was doing, so I decided I'd give it another go. I'd go for my third career in my life and get back to illustration and comics, and that's exactly what I did. Unfortunately, I was very, very naive. So I'd been in business, I'd been in publishing, I'd been in art direction and design and marketing and all that kind of stuff. But that meant absolutely nothing when it came to comic books. So I thought maybe I could approach a studio or a publishing house and say, look, I'm on my way. I still need to get my style sorted out, but I've got a lot of credentials to my name. I've been around. I know my way around Photoshop and production and all kinds of other things. No, just blunt, get stuffed. So I had a couple of rejections from 2000 AD. They were valid rejections, but I also found myself coming to grips with my own style, with the way that I worked, and starting to appreciate a far wider range of other comic book styles. So it took me until 2011 to appreciate the genius of Kirby. I was pretty much in that mindset where I wasn't that keen. I loved John Buscema. I loved Steranko, Stalin, Sinnott, all those kind of classics, Neil Adams, the classic Bronze Age stuff. But I wasn't, it didn't click with me why Kirby was a genius. But I cottoned onto that pretty quick, and that actually expanded my mind to take in all kinds of other comic book styles. And with that, I started feeding that back into my own work. I started off actually digitally working because I was very nervous about inking physically, and so the way to my style has kind of come backward, whereas most people started off traditionally and moved to digital. It's the other way around for me.
Yeah.
And I picked up a gig early on. I started working with JD Rosario over at Unstoppable Comics. He believed in me and gave me some work, which was great. Because I was a bit older and had done some things, I was able to take some risks financially. And in the end, I decided to move house. We sold our house and got a much smaller one further out in the country, so that we had far fewer financial problems, as it were, commitments. And so I took very low-paying gigs and took risks and did lots of different things. And one of the books that I worked on had a writer on it called Jason Quinn, and his brother Tim Quinn used to edit for Marvel. He edited for like the Hulk, X-Men, Spider-Man, that kind of stuff, and so did Jason. And Jason ended up working with me, and then he went off to Campfire graphic novels over in India, and actually won awards for his work. He was like a new content manager or manager of content, I think. He came back, and Doctor Who Adventures was being done by Panini, and he offered me the job. So basically, I got to work on Doctor Who around 2015, by which time I'd developed my style to a point where it was worthy, at least, of a chance, of a go at something. And then on the back of that, I got asked to draw the Marvel Way, where I drew tutorials and characters and stuff for an ongoing book that lasted for, it was 100 issues. I think it was 5 years. It was 4 or 5 years. I think it was 100 issues. And I got in there at issue 8, and I worked with on a team. One of the team was Mike Collins, who is a legend in the industry. And I also ended up working with Tim Quinn as well on stuff. I did a lot of charity work with him and what have you. Not me, I got paid, but they were for charity projects, very, very good projects, which I still do with him. And so that kind of, it all started gaining some momentum for me. And then I got the Ben 10 gig, and then all of a sudden, nothing, because Doctor Who Adventures stopped, and Ben 10 stopped, and then so did the Marvel gig stop, and there was nowhere else for me to go. It was like banging my head against a brick wall. It was very, very difficult to get in. Whatever people say about, the industry as it stands, about how to get into places, everybody's got their own tale of how they break into comics. But it's pretty much, there's still a lot of the same kind of ways in as there used to be, and that is knowing editors. And when you know people, they kind of, it's not that they just give you the job because they're your mate. You have to be able to do the job. But networking works, and it works whether you're in publishing or whether you're in computing or design.
Thank you.
It requires you to get out there, do things, and make yourself seen, but also at the same time remain professional and communicate with people on a level. So that said, I decided, right, well, the industry is changing. We all know it doesn't matter where you sit, what corner you fight in. The industry is changing. It's changing radically. And I saw crowdfunding, and I also realized that, the thing that I really wanted to do when I was a kid was be in the bullpen and draw pages. That's all I want to do. I just want to sit there and draw pages. But I realized I had to do more than that. It wasn't enough. You couldn't just, the bullpen didn't exist anyway. And this whole, how you get the gigs and how they can drop off just immediately, and you've got nothing to go to rely on. So I looked for other work, which I did do. I was involved in some online, some AI driven storytelling, and I did some storyboarding for film, and then I took an opportunity when the coup turned up, and all my clients kind of dropped off a cliff because there was no work, and so I took the opportunity to do my own book, which was Only Death Can Save Us. I'd had the idea, I'd written the script 18 months before that, and I wanted to make the comics that I loved as a kid. The thing that really hit me when I did Doctor Who Adventures was that even though it was technically for 8 to 15-year-olds, it was an all-ages book. So you write it. The writers were brilliant in it. They never spoke down to kids. They always put in like lots of long words, just like I read from Bronze Age comics. And people needed to go and check out. You go online now. It used to be use a dictionary or go to the library. Now you go online, look at Google. It doesn't matter. The point is you're opening people's minds. You're educating them by entertaining them. And all ages was a big thing for me. Because that's where my love was as a kid. I didn't realize it. It took me a while to understand what made me, go for it. I was a big fan in the 90s as well, and I didn't quite realize what it was that was getting my juices flowing. But that's what it is, all ages. So that's what I wanted to make. And also I realized that only by making your own business, truly being in control of your own IP, could you actually get any kind of remote idea of being safe. Do you know what I mean? It's like having some kind of, you drive your own brand, you drive your own IP, and so you drive your own revenue streams. But also I really wanted to write all ages, fun action comic books. So that's what I did. Since then, I've been enticed into other people's projects. I work with a guy called Joe Fulton, great writer. I also, I do some Doctor Who on the Doctor Who magazine every now and then. And there's other projects that are kind of laid out in front of me. Right at the moment, I'm pretty much focused on book 2. Obviously, Arrow Comics picked up the book to serialize it, so it's being done in chunks. But it'll be ready for March next year when it's supposed to ship. And also I do, other gigs that come in. So I have to make sure and schedule it. So for book 2, for instance, from a production point of view, I've had to get in other people. I've had to get in other people to letter it, to do some of the backup inks for me, and also do the flatting, which I didn't do last time. Last time I did absolutely everything. But because I've got these other projects involved, I have to get a wider team. But and also the writer Rick Hoskin, we're now co-writing it. And we have like a kind of a writer's room going on before we get going. So there's a team now rather than just me.
Very cool. I want to kind of go back to what you were saying about like rejections. From my own experience as an independent creator, I started off really with I've always been writing, but, with singing. And to have that one person that says, you're never going to make it, go find something else to do, was a crushing blow. I mean, totally like I had to go back and lick my wounds and things like that. That must have been painful for you to hear, but you kept coming back.
Yeah, it's I didn't
stubborn. Oh, you didn't trust him.
No, and have you sent that person a copy of your comic yet?
No, I think he's dead.
Here's your rubbish. Here's your rubbish.
I'll drop one on his grave. That sounds a bit hideous, doesn't it? No, it's difficult. I mean, that was over a period of time. I have had, letters back from publishers. At the same time I was accepted at Marvel, I got a neutral one from Image. They said, yeah, we'll pass around the editors. I got a rejection from Dark Horse and a rejection from DC. So, it wasn't all just everything was rosy. But it's just something you have to do. It's in you. I think if you were playing an instrument and you were desperate to play that instrument in front of other people, because at the end of the day, what you're doing with books is you're communicating. If you just want to draw for yourself and put it on your own wall, there's a whole different kind of art. There's a whole different kind of approach to what you're doing. So, playing a musical instrument in your house for relaxation is a completely different thing. It's like painting watercolors. It's for you, and that's it. But if you want to create a comic book you're communicating with a potential audience. That's what you're about. And there is communication because they're buying your book, okay, and they're taking in your ideas. And if they like it, the communication back is, I'll buy the next one, or I'll trust you to tell a story in wherever else you might be. So there's that direct communication. So much like if you were going to go out and play a musical instrument at a pub or a club, you don't have to be on a massive stage being the top rock star. You can be a rock star to 1,000 people rather than a run-of-the-mill nothing to 1 million people, because it's those 1,000 people's response. It's the communication you get from them, their eagerness to be part of what you're creating that's most important. So much like now with comics, this is developed over the last 10 years, specific 5 years even, especially with crowdfunding. You are able to say, okay, well, I'm not going to get accepted by X publisher, then I'll just go out and do it myself. And of course, then you're in the marketplace of ideas. If it's good enough, and people like you, and people like the book, they'll come back. If it's not, then you're your own gatekeeper. Because if you can't put something together that will excite enough people to make it something that you can continue to do financially, then maybe you're not good enough. But that's the lesson you have to learn by getting out there and doing it. Just listening to what other people say when they say you ain't good enough is not the way to do it. I think constructive criticism is always the best response to anybody asking for help. Not you're not good enough.
Definitely.
More along the lines of, well, okay, I don't think you're good enough yet, but if you do this, if you do this, if you do this, then there's every chance that you could be. Okay, and it gives someone that you don't want to give people false hope, but that comes down to your criticism being direct and honest. So somebody says, I've drawn this picture and it's really great, and what do you think? And it's like, you've done a great job, but your knees are wrong. They're totally wrong. You need to go away and work out how knees work, or you need to go away and work out how hands work. And even though you might be drawing in a certain way that doesn't require ultra realism, there's certain rule sets that you need to adhere to in order to fool the eye and convince the brain that something's there for you to follow. So it doesn't matter whether you're rubber hosing, like I did Ben 10. It was all like, rubber hose arms and legs and all that, but it still required the weight of the characters and the movement of the characters and how that was done through sequential art properly in order to carry the reader along with it. So there's these underpinning rules that you really need to get right, and then you can let yourself go.
It's amazing how much the brain will fill in as long as you don't have those missteps and things like that, because when it's wrong, then it's like you trip over it and you're like, oh no. And then all of a sudden it's like, it's a blanket. That's crap. And you don't want to see it anymore. And so like kind of understanding where it's okay to let that slide. Like you were saying, the rubber arms and stuff, that's okay. But if the kneecap's off, it's just like, it throws the entire thing off.
Exactly. It still needs to give, you can't have the arm bend the wrong way,
right?
Or you can't have the arm bend so far down that it looks like there's no elbow and it's all just wrist.
Yeah, the anatomy doesn't have to have the hyper realism, but it has to be believable.
Exactly. Well, not so much believable, but it needs to fool the mind. It needs to make the mind comfortable with whatever character or creation you're putting together, so that it doesn't jar you out of the story. And that, again, doesn't matter if it's really simple artwork or really complex artwork. It's all too easy to be thrown out of a story because something's not quite right.
Yeah, I wanted to get back to the rejection letters too, because those who have gotten rejections, congratulations. And I mean that in a very good way, because that means you've actually done something, sent it, and gotten some sort of feedback, which is a hell of a lot more than a lot of people do. I remember the first rejection that I got. I cried, and then I laughed, and then I framed it. And I was just like, I made it.
Yeah.
They didn't want me, but that was like, I went through that process to get that letter. And, so it doesn't have to be a bad thing. I mean, some people will be like, well, screw you, and I'm done with this, forget it, because you're not an
If you're
overnight
prepared
success.
if you're not prepared, I mean, there are going to be the odd few people that just come straight out of art school or whatever school it might be and just go straight in. They're genius level material. I mean, the one person I can think of, I mean, apart from Nita, the one person I can think of would be Jamie Hewlett, who did Tank Girl. He was the artist on the Gorillaz animations. And he just came straight out and went straight into Deadline, I think it was, that Tank Girl was in. And his art was just like off the bat, just straight away, was just gorgeous. Just, it had a wonderful style to it. You knew it as soon as you saw it, you knew who it was. Which I think is a target that every comic book artist should have. He just came straight out of university and just did it. But
we hate those people.
99% of us, that will not happen. Okay, It just won't. You have to work hard, and you have to work hard for a period of time. It doesn't just turn up. And of course, what that does is that by working your way through the rejections, by working your way through the errors, it makes you stronger, and it makes you wiser, and it makes you more focused on what you're going to do. If you just think after the first letter, I don't like this, I'm not going to do it, then you didn't really want to do it in the first place.
Yeah.
It's an opinion, sorry, but that's the way I see it.
I'm with you 100%. And I have to say, I did want to talk to you about developing your own style, because I have to say, I'm going to show an example, okay? A blank page is probably one of the scariest things that a creator will face. A totally blank page, because when you're out there and you're trying to create your own things, and it's staring at you, and it's almost like you can't force it, but sometimes you have to, and just because you got to keep exercising your brain, you have to keep exercising your art. But when it comes to developing your own style, one of the things that's been really cool about interviewing people for a couple of years now is that that realization, seeing them on social media, going, I think this is my style. I think I've finally come into my own. And it's a wonderful feeling, and to watch that is really, really cool. How do you feel about your own style? When did you come into that and go, this is distinctly mine? It's not me doing anything, like anybody else's characters. It's not Ben 10. It's not this and that. It's like, this is mine.
Right.
What was that process for you when you could finally kind of cut the umbilical cord from everybody else's stuff and say, this is it, this is me?
I don't think you ever cut that cord, because you have inspirations and they never go away. But I think rather than actually reach an end point, I don't feel I've reached an end point yet. I have a direction now where you can see me in it. Other people can look at it and go, right, that looks like Russ's work. Okay. But it's always going to be in development, as it were. I think the point is, rather than your style, it's an internal thing. It's a switch. It's a point where you go, I'm going to draw it the way I want to draw it. And I'm going to trust myself to draw it that way. Once you start doing that, then you're on your own path, rather than just on the path where you're taking inspiration from everywhere else. Then you're starting to make it up yourself. You're starting to make decisions rather than looking at something else. You think, no, I'm going to draw it this way because that's the way I want it. Now, the way that you draw it may well be inspired and colored by the people that inspire you, by those other artists, but it's become part of you now. It's become part of the way that you produce, and so it becomes you. And it also depends what you draw as well. I think my style comes through a bit more in in Only Death Can Save Us, because it's me just like chucking stuff at the page. Whereas if I draw a Doctor Who or something like that, it becomes maybe a little bit more generic, because I have to get faces correct, and I have to make sure that people look the way that they should look, and all those things. So I dial the style back, as it were, and go for something a bit more sort of not generic. I won't call it generic, because it isn't generic, because it's still me, but not quite as far into my own style. So there won't be any strangeness to it as such. But that's what you do when you have a particular gig. So, for instance, for Ben 10, the way that I drew for that, I don't have a cartoony style. That's not what I do. But Ben 10 being the way it was, being part of Cartoon Network, it came with a style guide. So I had to adhere to that style guide. So I actually approached drawing Ben 10 in the way that I approached a design project. So those pages for Ben 10 were going to look as close as possible to the show as I could make it look, added with my abilities with sequential art and making it exciting story read. So that was that. So I applied myself in that way. The stuff that I did for Unstoppable was actually, that was part of my development, and I could see actually from one book to the next how I was changing, because I was changing so quickly. I don't think I'm changing as quickly now, because I'm not sort of going down that road of saying, "Oh, that looks nice, squirrel." I'm running off in that direction for something shiny. I'm seeing something that maybe might work for me, and I'll see if I can put that in. But at that point in time, sort of 7 or 8 years ago, I was still really much looking around for me, and I found me probably a couple of years ago at sort of the end of the Marvel Way stuff. And then I really found me when I started doing traditional inking rather than digital inking, because I found something that I didn't realize I had. So, without experimentation, you're never going to find your way.
So what was because you started off with digital, what was the thing that made you go, let me try this traditional thing?
First off, I went and looked. I went, I particularly David Finch's web YouTube channel. But I went and looked around for inking, because I really felt that with my first book, I wanted to create some tiers where people could get original artwork from the book, because I know that some people collect and some people like that. So I thought, right, I'm going to do 4 or 5 pages from the first book, and I'm going to make them traditional. So I printed out the pencils, because I still digitally pencil. I feel it is no different to penciling on a light box, except it's a whole lot quicker. So I still digital pencil. So I did that, and then I used the brush pens on that, and found that I loved it. It was a bit of an epiphany. I thought, okay, I better get on with this, and found that I absolutely loved doing it. And bizarrely, because of the way that my style has grown, because I did everything digitally, I've kind of nailed down my pencils, not to the point of where I just trace them, but I get them to a point where I know exactly what I want out of the page. And actually, my traditional inking has become quicker than my digital inking, because with digital inking, you get drawn into drawing too small very, very easily. So for instance, the way that it works for me, I would do things at size 300 DPI, so that when I draw at 50% of the dots per square inch, and that actually comes out a roughly an artboard page in real life, so that when I draw, it's about right. And even though the feel of the stylus on the Cintiq screen is great, I loved it, absolutely love it, still do. There are points where because you're on a 72 dots per square inch screen, that you really need to zoom in a little bit. And I try to not zoom any more than 65%, 70%. And even then, I only flick a couple of things in and come out. But when you're inking, it's so easy to get lost. You go down the rabbit hole, and then you end up seeing the I've just got to get this face right, and it's like the face is like that big, and you've zoomed into 100% to get a face
oh my
right.
God.
And it's like, no, what are you doing? First off, it takes you too long. Secondly, no one's going to see it because when it's printed, you can't see it. So when I went to traditional, I kind of cut all that out. So I'm actually drawing far quicker with a brush pen than I was with a digital pen.
That makes sense until you mess up or you just have an arm spasm. You're like, oh, damn it.
I've not had the cat eat it just
That's
yet.
what I was going to go for. The cat run across it while it's fucking wet.
The cat does decide. That's the other great thing about the fact that technology has moved on with brush pens. The ink is drying real quick. I've got some really good quick drying ink, and the pens themselves tend not to go all over the place. I know that I should be trying. I bought myself a sable brush, but I tried it and I'm just really awful with it. It just splodges everywhere. Whereas I've got myself down with the brushes. They've got man-made tips that they last a long time. And when I say tips, it is a brush. It's a brush at the end of the pen. So you get that whole feel and effect, and it works perfectly for me. I'm a big advocate of whatever works. So I use all kinds of things to get it right. I've got double-ended felt tip pens. I've got marker pens for a bit of Kirby Crackle.
Pull out a Sharpie. Advertise.
Multiple brush pens. I've got a really expensive brush pen. I've got really cheap ones, and I use these Fuden Usuki, which has got a much easier name that people recognise. Where are we? There it is. Tomboy. There you go. Tombow pens. Now they're brilliant. They still have a brush on the end, but it's a very tight fiber tip brush. But it is a brush, cool. And so that means that you can get in small, do some detail, but still have a flick and a width, a variation of line width. And they are brilliant. I just got bought 5 more of those today. And then I've got some Pentel pocket brushes as well. I've got my orange Pentel pocket brush. This is superb.
All of a sudden they become addictions. And it's like stay out of the craft store, Russ.
Right.
That's it. I've got spares of everything. I'm done now. I've found my brushes. So that's me done. I've got a brush for everything. I have brushes for all. So for instance, these ones are double-ended, and actually the felt tip pen end is great for key lines. Also for strike lines, if you get it just right, you can flick off the end of it, and they're great for that. So I've got a tool for every job now, and I absolutely like. I'll show you something quick. This is don't tell anyone else. Right, there you go. Yes.
Ooh.
There's some Dr. Boo going on there. And also whiteouts, Posca. These are superb. They do clog up and all the rest of it, like other whiteout pens, but they're fantastic. They're the best whiteout pen you can get, and I encourage people to use them. It really helps with the inking. Yeah.
And Mike Jimmy is here. He says, "Ooh, shit, we're talking inking supplies."
Yeah, we were. That's another that.
He says, "I'll show you mine if you show me yours."
Oh God, don't go down.
It's like all the art people comparing notes and things like that. We've got Joe D. McPhee tuning in. We've got Catch the Craze podcast. Hello, Sam doing, or George. It could be either one. Of course, we've got Marv V. Michaela is tuning in as well. Thank you guys. Thank you.
What an audience.
It's great, and make sure you guys share this out. And also in the show descriptions, we've got Russ's social media links, as well as the link to Only Death Can Save Us 2.
Yeah, you can come see me on my I'll be on at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight, where I do a bit of drawing. So I'll probably be digital penciling tonight.
And you've also got the Arrow floppy. They're limited supply signed.
Yeah,
I need to get on that before that disappears.
Yeah, limited supply of those. They're signed. They're variants shipping those over to me, and then I'll be shipping them back.
Very cool, very cool. So yeah, I mean, definitely get over there and check it out. Nita, You want to get in here and throw in a bump so that we can have a sip of water or something like that?
Yeah, I'm on it. The cat wouldn't shut up, so I had to freaking mute.
She's got a cat. It has its own language. It's the strangest thing I've ever heard.
All right, you guys, here we go.
And we are back from our little bump there, and that was Snowpaw on Kickstarter. Rob Multeri, give it a little bit of love. The link is also in the show notes. But hey, we're back. We're raging with Russ Leach. Let me drop the card here and welcome him back.
That looks a nice book, doesn't it?
Oh, it's gorgeous. That's Mog Park's first interiors, man. And we like because we hang out with Mog sometimes, we get to watch her painting. Oh, nice. It's so beautiful.
James is a hunk.
Yes, and the evil werewolves, the bad guys,
just for variant.
Now, so I'm looking at your interiors, and one of the things that I love about your art style is that it reminds me of like the comics that I used to read, and I mean, when I was younger, we were pretty poor, so I couldn't, we didn't go to the comic book stores.
We were a Bronze Age kid, that's why.
We had the Sunday funnies, and that was it. And we only got them after Dad read them. But like the art style reminds me of like the 80s and 90s. It reminds me of like kind of Prince Valiant in a way.
Oh, wow.
And so it's like very familiar. So as soon as I opened up the book and I saw the artwork, especially on your first campaign, I was just like, oh yes, this feels like coming home, like a throwback to my youth.
I've had a few people say that to me, and it warms the heart when I hear it, because that's exactly what I wanted. That there's only a few things that do that to you in your time when you're reading or watching films, or whatever. Watching Lord of the Rings for the first time dropped my jaw because it looked exactly like I imagined it when I read it. So forget about all the CGI and everything. Just the first film, very slow, but that was what the first books were like. In the first two books were like, but I was sat there in awe because it was what was in my head. The same with Civil War, seeing and the first Avengers movie. It's like, oh my god, I prefer comics to films every time. But the fact is that when you're a kid, you're thinking, oh, wouldn't it be great if you could just see them on the screen? The first time you see Star Wars, although obviously that was the first time. But these things, they make you feel comfortable in some way because they're bringing back something that you love. So that was what I wanted to do. I just wanted to make the books that I loved when I was a kid. And I got a lot of the first book I ever bought out with my own money. Well, it was pocket money, but it was my own money. Was Captain Britain, which was a Marvel UK original title at the time. And it had reprints of old Fantastic Four, Nick Fury, Agent of Shield. It did some Avengers and some Doctor Strange as well, I think, and all that stuff just like went in, and it stayed in there. Then of course 2000 AD I was reading and all that kind of stuff. So it was kind of this weird mixture of 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s Marvel pop culture and some Batman thrown in. I've always loved Batman, and 2000 AD. And it was this kind of heady mix of all of it. And those are the things that I wanted to make. So when people say to me, oh yeah, that's just like the books I used to read, or it really felt like it was, it was something from a particular time period, I've nailed it. So I'm really happy with
the highest compliment, because it's exactly what you were going for.
Exactly what I was going for. Yes. And then even more so the fact it was my first time out as a writer, and for people to come back and say, oh, I loved what you did there. Do you know what I mean? I loved what you did with Chrissy and Dee and their relationship, because it's easy to look at the book and just say it's just big, pantheon of the gods, muscular dudes kicking the living daylights out of each other and demons. But there is tongue in cheek in there. There is comedy in there, and there's this pathos between the sort of not unfeeling death, but certainly sort of above the general cacophony of human life, of ordinary mortal souls, and joining with Chrissy, who's just a normal person. She's clever, she's but she's just an average Joe, and the two of them getting together, and the fact that people were able to pick up on what I was trying to do, that meant huge amounts to me, because I wasn't writing wasn't my thing. So yeah, it is the highest of compliments for people to say this feels like coming home. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that segued beautifully into the next question that I had, which was about the writing process, because your beginning is pretty much in art. So when it came time to write out the story, develop these characters and things like that, what was the biggest hurdle for you as far as putting ideas down on paper?
Biggest hurdle.
Perhaps
I suppose it's just the process. I'm not a writer, so I didn't really know where to start. I did go and look up some concepts about start, middle, end. I know that's a basic one, but things like that, and how to write out an ending, and how to the hero's journey, how to create an environment where your hero grows, where there must be some kind of urgency and danger. Your hero can't be all powerful, otherwise it's no fun. So those things, going and finding out about those things and piling that into what I was doing, for instance, making Dee not all powerful just because he's deaf, he didn't, and so making him this character, also finding a way to, I know this expression is awful, to subvert the expectations of the reader. That's used in far too many ways to cover poor writing. But I wanted to put something out there where people went, oh, that's different. But at the same time, because it's death, everybody knows death. Everyone knows death like they know God, or like the Tooth Fairy. It's something that everybody is aware of, and there's been lots of presentations of death, particularly people like Terry Pratchett in the past, and also the Four Horsemen. And I wanted to reverse that round, and so Dee became the hero. He's the guy that that's on the side of right and might, although he seems particularly disinterested in the physical world. So I just, coming up with those ideas was in itself the hardest part, kind of forming them into a coherent structure where you could tell a story out of them.
So when you were writing down the ideas, were you thinking of the panels in your head? So you kind of had the artist brain leading you, or did you kind of outline it? Did you write in prose first? What was that process like for you?
The first part of it, the initial part, was literally notes. So I would wake up in the middle of the night and write a note and then put it to one side, come back to it. So it was a whole bunch of notes. I had a core story that I had right at the start, and the core story was how Dee, or how death would be humanized by the sacrifice of a mortal soul. So that's the core, the absolute core of it. And in order to portray that, I needed something to be very dangerous. So Satana and the whole cosmic backdrop to the whole thing. And so that there was that core of a story. And from the core of a story, I expanded it out. So right at the start, for instance, the first scene where you see them 18 billion years ago at the end of the second age, before the third age comes to be, and Satana is required to be defeated, that was never there in the start. That was an expansion of the story where I thought, no, this needs something. It needs a big opening. You know, it needs something for you to go, oh, well, this, and then you can kind of slide into the rest of the story. So it was kind of modular, I suppose. I had a core to it, and then I added as I went along. But it took me a while to kind of sort that out, of like several drunken nights of waking up and writing notes. And I basically let it percolate for a while, because at the time I was writing it, I was not in a mega rush. So I gave myself the time to think about it. And then eventually I got it to a point where I wrote notes down then, and only after I'd written those all down with a pencil did I eventually get to a point where I thought, right, now I'm going to commit to, a file and start typing away. And I tapped out a sort of a storyline, and then expanded on that storyline. At the point of expansion, to where I was going to write a full plot out, it's at that point I started thinking visually. So I started thinking about, how am I going to tell this in a way that I'm going to, create a fun visual experience. That said, that, so for instance, where I was talking about it being modular and I expanded it, part of that expansion also came with some visual cues. So for instance, the idea of having the big battle scene right at the start obviously comes with visual perspective to it. You're obviously going to do something, a bit bigger. You're going to have a splash page or a double page spread or something. So that in itself came sort of inherently with visual cues. But the story was never, the writing is never solely driven by what's the prettiest picture I can put on the page. It's always driven by the story and how best to implement that. And along the way, if I can create splash pages or fun stuff that's visually, exciting, then yeah, I'll use that. So for instance, in the second book, where we had the writer's room, when I sat down with Rick, I came up with a few cues. So there is a point where I wanted a massive battle between Dee and something else, and I framed it in a certain way. Rick took it away, kept the battle in, but completely changed the emphasis and who he was battling, actually. And came back and said, well, what do you think of this? And so I could, I'm great with that. That's the visual cue that I want. It actually fits with the story that I was thinking of. You just come at it from a different perspective. And then he's written the whole plot down, and he's actually himself put some visual cues in as well. So for instance, on the first page of the second part, there is an homage, as it were, to a Silver Surfer page. Now, it might not look like an homage, but it's written in that way for me. One of the pages that I literally just put up in one of the updates, that is an homage, and that's an homage to an Iron Man cover. I think it's by Bob Layton, where he puts on all his gear in the 4 panels and then like stands there ready to go for it. And so there are little nods and winks to things that I've loved throughout, the things that I love in comics. Somebody noticed that there may well be a very famous starship captain in the pages of the war backup story. But for instance, in the first story, there's a line in there that's kind of very similar to a line from Billy and Mandy's The Adventures of Billy and Mandy, The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, which was which it had Grim, which was death, and Chrissy says, "Don't make him use his kung fu," and that's directly out of that's like a swipe from Billy and Mandy. There's another couple of swipes. There's another couple of hints towards Star Trek as well in the first book, and it's there for people to find if they look hard enough. But it's not like an Easter egg. It's just I'm just bringing the stuff that I love and regurgitating it through my own stories. So, and I would say that's part of that process that you're talking about as well. Is just like with the style, with the art style, you're not just copying other people. You're inspired by things, and those are the things that you want to make, and so you get on and do it.
Well, yeah, of course. In whether it's movies or even music with a riff that is familiar and it'll stay in your ear forever, whether it's an art piece that you're inspired by, it's those things that capture your attention and stay with you. And it's like, how can I incorporate that? Because there's a brilliance to that, because it brings in a sense of familiarity, not just to you, but to the people who are kind of flipping through and go, why does this look familiar? Why does this, why do I know this story?
Why does that ring a bell? Yeah.
Right. It's like, and it does. It brings that familiarity to it that people crave, I think.
Yeah.
Kind of like a comfortable feeling or a familiar smell. That's just like,
it's like that with books, isn't it? You go back and read books again and again and again because you just feel great while you're reading them. And Dee himself, it's a recognizable character because we've all been aware of, or at least in the Western world, we've all been aware of that characterization of death through pop culture and literature. So it's kind of there's something to hang on to there as well. I'm not suggesting that he's a comfortable character. I don't think he is, but it's like you're saying, it's ringing the bell. It's like you're going, oh, right, okay, but it's not the way you expect it to be, which piques your interest. So it's not a copy; it's an inspiration, and that's that. I think that's really the key, because none of us are truly original anymore. But that doesn't mean that we can't try to be.
And with death being immortal, this story can continue on. Where do you see this? Because you're on book 2. Not sure if you're working on book 3 or another property, but where do you see this going? Is there kind of a big number that kind of scares you, or spin-offs from this that you'd be working on?
No, the only thing that scares me is being able to produce it all. I have to get other people involved. If it was to get to a point where I'm doing lots and lots and lots, I would have to let go of the reins somewhat and give it to other people to do. But that's a success story that you shouldn't worry about. As far as me doing, the small end of it, there's definitely going to be a book 3 because there is an arc. And at the end of book 2, you'll see some of that. There's also the arc for books 4, 5, and 6, which have something to do with the second book. And then after books 4, 5, and 6, should there be demand? I mean, this is all down to demand. If I can't increase demand, then there's no point doing the book, because there's obviously nobody wants to read it. But if I can continue to grow, even slow growth, that's good. For the demand for the book, then that's fine. Then I actually have a plan that once they're through the second 3 books, so once you've done 4, 5, 6, what we can do with them after that as the two of them together. So there are plans, there are options, there are stories already in place. The third book, it really depends on circumstances that I can't discuss openly, unfortunately. They're all good things, but it may be that I have to jump straight into the third book in the new year, or it may be that I work on somebody else's project and then come at it again later on in the year. But the third book will be done.
Yeah, because there are people who, they've sat in the hot seat and said, yeah, this is going to be 100 books, 100 stories. Like, does that ever feel too big? It's like, oh my gosh,
Yes.
And then there are some who are just like by the seat of their pants. It's like, I put in a cliffhanger, but it can stop here if it needs to.
Yeah. Well, the first one was kind of like that. I needed to gauge the response. But there was always a 3-book arc in my mind. There was always a particular story that I was trying to tell. And then when Rick got involved, it actually turned it slightly and had an even more of a stellar end to the third book, which takes you off directly into books 4, 5, 6. So it's exciting stuff, but I would never look too far beyond that. Because you've got to gauge what people want, and it doesn't matter how much I love this book or how much we think it's a great book, or even how much people think it's a great book. If they ain't buying it, there's no point in making more of them. So you have to be realistic about how far it'll go. I'd love to carry on doing this for as long as people will buy it. To be honest, that's the answer. And there are plenty of options for me to put into stories.
When you were talking about you and Rick in the writer's room, it kind of reminded me of passing the notebook when I was in high school from one friend to another. And we were only allowed to write one page, and we had to stop and let the other friend, whoever got the next, whoever got the notebook next, to do that. And there would be twists and turns that you never expected. And it's like, oh, you went there. Okay. And almost like that one-upmanship to make the story even better.
It is a little bit like that.
Yeah. So having said that, one of the challenges that we find a lot of creators have is putting together that core team that you can work with, where you develop that relationship and that communications shorthand. And we kind of cleave on to those people. Sometimes it closes the door to new people. How are you as far as like developing your team? Like, are you kind of like, nope, I'm keeping it close till death do us part? Or are you kind of like, yeah, I'll give you a chance because maybe I didn't have that when I was starting out?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that a couple of people that I'm working with, I would say I've approached, and they're not necessarily who you would have thought I would have approached. I at the same time, I don't want to give out the impression that I'm this big shot and I know the talent that I should be taking, and people should be fortunate to work with me. That's I don't like seeing it that way. But I think if you connect with people and they work, it's not so much keeping other people out. It's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So when you get used to working with people and you can depend on them, which is the most important thing at the end of the day, knowing that you can depend on a source to get things done in a timely fashion and be on brief, on time, on budget. It's difficult to let those people go, or it's difficult to let other people in if those other people are going to come in for the places that you already have filled. So it's not that you don't want to give other people a chance. It's that, when you're producing stuff like that, and it doesn't matter whether it's a crowdfunded book or whether you're working for a publisher or in a design team. If you find people that you can trust and are going to do the job, you tend to stick with them until they say, I'm off to do something else. And then you have to find someone else. So it's not about keeping other people out or not wanting to give other people a chance. It's about getting jobs done, unfortunately. And when people turn up and they're really good, you kind of keep hold of them.
Very good. And if it's okay, I'd like to play your video, and then because we're at the end of our hour, and then I have one more question for you.
Okie doke.
We good with that?
Yeah.
Let's do it, you guys. This is Only Death Can Save Us, Book 2, Techstone on IndieGoGo. 13 days left. Reached goal. 107 backers. Let's do it. Let's do some more. All right. Back this book. It's amazing. Here we go. That's right, you guys. Get over to IndieGoGo and give this some love. Share it out with your friends. If you've already backed it, thank you. If you haven't, take a look at it. There we go. And we're going to just remove that. Okay, Russ. As we close out the show, one of the things that I love to ask our creators is if you were going to give someone new coming into the industry the best piece of advice, what would it be?
It's positive advice. Be prepared for rejection. Be prepared for rejection and have a plan. Don't just throw things at the wall and see if they work. Believe in yourself. I know this is more than one piece of advice. Believe in yourself. Get good criticism. Get constructive criticism from people that you respect and know. Not your mum, not your sister, not your best mate down the pub. Okay? People that know what they're talking about. Get good criticism and be realistic about what you think you can do. And then have a plan. And that plan may well include that you do something else to get money involved so that you can finance yourself for a while. So, for instance, just as an example, crowdfunding, you need to show, whether you're a writer, whether you're an artist, whatever it might be, you need to show that you've done some work. It's called sweat equity in the world of business, where you have investment money. The investors want to see some sweat equity. They want to see you sweated through it before they decide they're going to put some money in. And backers want to see that you've already put the work in. And that includes things like YouTube, it includes things like being available as in social media, being polite, being courteous to people, being professional, okay, and putting in that equity, and then people feel like they've already got something for you before they decide to back you. So yeah, have a plan, be professional, get good criticism.
I love that. I love that because definitely not from mom or your best friend or anything like that, because really, I mean, that might feel good, but is it going to move you forward?
No.
So,
no.
And Russ, you did say that you're going to do a live draw later. Where can people find you?
You can find me over on my channel, Comic Book Black Belt on YouTube. The links for that, I'm going to have to do a link tree, but the links for that are on my website, russleach.com or comicbookblackbelt.com, wherever you want to go to. And you can find out more about Only Death Can Save Us, onlydeathcansaveus.com. The links to the IndieGoGo campaign are there as well as in your description. Thank you. And yeah, you can find me on the Twitter, the Fleecebook, the Minds, or the Instagram. I'm around. I do the roots, and more than happy to talk to anyone, okay, who's going to be nice, who's going to be courteous about comic book art and comics. Doesn't matter where you're from, what you look like, what's in your trousers. I don't care.
Don't be an asshole.
Yeah, don't be an arsehole.
That's
be
our
nice,
policy.
okay, and that's good enough for me. Everybody needs to talk.
There you go. I appreciate you. And what time is that this evening?
It's 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or 11 p.m. UK time.
Okay. All right. And is that a weekly show, daily?
I do that on a Monday night. Every Monday night, I pick out what I'm drawing that day and chuck it on the board or chuck it on the screen, whatever it might be. So this week I'm going to have to quickly knock up some scamps before I do it, but I've got to do the cover for part 4. Issue 5 of the Arrow serialization, because I'm doing it as I go through the book. I'm doing things like extra covers and stuff. So I've got to do that. So I've got to draw that. So I'm probably just going to sit and draw that tonight for an hour. I've got my whiskey.
I was going to ask you, is
yeah. I ran out of whiskey, but my wife went out. My wife went out and bought me some more whiskey, so I'm good. Yes, she's a keeper. So I've got my whiskey and I've got my board. So that's what I'll be drawing tonight. But it, from one week to the next, whether it's traditional inking, drawing, sometimes using digital inking, coloring, whatever it might be, I just pop it up and show people what I'm doing so that they can see what I do, basically.
Well, we appreciate you for being here, everybody. This has been Raging with Russ Leach, episode 58. Make sure that you subscribe to his channel as well. All of the links are in the show description, as well as his IndieGoGo. Go give that some love. Share it out with your friends. We appreciate everyone who does that, and we appreciate you for tuning in. On that note, hey, Nita.
Yo.
Final words.
Draw my dudes.
Bye, guys. Hey there, this is Meredith Loughran with RAGIN, and I wanted to let you know that we encourage and promote independent creators and their projects through organic interaction, consultations, and more. Visit Nita and me at RAGINAVC.com for details and contact information.